You're listening to Out of the Box with Rosie Tran. Out of the Box is sponsored by hugmetees.com. Spread love, give a hug, hugmetees.com. I am here today with David Seaman, host of the David Seaman Hour and also Bitcoin advocate and journalist. David, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on today, Rosie.
I am so excited to have you here. I just wanted to say that I had Matt Staggs on early on in the podcast, and I was asking him political questions. And one of the things that he said to me was, well, I like to leave politics to people who know what they're talking about, like David Seaman.
Well, I wouldn't even say that I know what I'm talking about. That's why I avoid politics talking about it now, because I think that it just seems so silly, the whole red and blue thing. We're all just people, and I feel like it's a whole industry to keep us clawing at each other. There's a lot of money to be made in that. You know, these pundits on Fox and MSNBC, that's actually their job, is to maintain that constant frenetic illusion that there's like two sides of this country.
And there's not. There's more than that. You know, other countries have multiple political parties. We only have, 3 or 4. We have the two main ones, and then we have, libertarian, independence, Tea Party, all that other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I just thought it was a huge compliment that he was paying you.
Oh, no, that's awesome. That's coming from Matt Staggs, the king of information. So
yeah. So for those of you who didn't listen, check it out. The episode with Matt Staggs, former editor of Disinfo. And he was telling me just how awesome David Seaman is.
I have the feeling's mutual for Matt Staggs. He's a cool guy.
So you started as a journalist and more of a political person when I originally met you, and now it seems like you're more of an Bitcoin alternative currency advocate.
Yeah, it's amazing what a trip to California and some weed can do to you. But no, I bought my first Bitcoin when I was still on the East Coast and living there, and just increasingly it seemed like this whole cryptocurrency thing in some way will get us out from underneath the worst stuff we're dealing with right now.
So what does that mean, the worst stuff? Elaborate for some of the listeners who maybe aren't on track with what you're saying.
I feel like efficiency is going downhill, even though so many parts of our lives are amazing now. Like we have, Google does everything but wipe your ass just about. And we have, Siri on the iPhones, and life is easier than it's ever been, and it's super efficient. And I don't remember the last time Google Maps made a mistake. And then you turn on the TV and it's like pharmaceutical ads and politicians who are way dumber than like your dumbest friend. And so you're like, what's going on here? We're still having wars in 2014. And like I just read earlier today that ISIS apparently has acquired 3 warplanes. And so now they're flying their own warplanes in Syria somewhere. And meanwhile, like you can't even go a day without paying your parking ticket on time, or they'll like end your life. Like the bureaucracy will just end you if you don't pay your shit on time. But you can just apparently buy 3 warplanes if you're a terrorist organization, and none of these creepy surveillance agencies seem to care or know what's going on. And you're like, this is chaos. This isn't the way things have to be done.
I totally agree. Before we get into some more of the crypto stuff, I want to talk to you because you're so well informed compared to the average person, and I think it's important for people to know. And I know you said you don't want to get too political, but how much of this do you think is totally overblown by the corporate media and machine, and how much of it is actual news, do you think?
I mean, this stuff is happening, so it's not like Ebola isn't a huge deal, and it's probably going to become more of a huge deal because of the way the government kind of bungled it by not just closing off flights from those countries, and that's just one example. Like the media latches on to something that is, in my opinion, somewhat frightening, something to be concerned about a little bit, but we can definitely handle it because we're a modern civilization. We have the tools to deal with the virus. And I do think that a lot of it's for profit. So instead of just telling you that story once during the day, and you're like, oh, okay, thanks, now I'm aware of Ebola. It's like 24/7 Ebola and like camera crews in front of the hospital. And what does that do? I saw that movie Gone Girl recently, and it kind of mocks the whole Nancy Grace crime show culture, where they just decide that somebody's guilty right away and then focus so much national awareness on that local case. And it's kind of fucked up. And that, I think a lot of our so-called news media is for entertainment, and they're owned by entertainment companies.
It's infotainment.
Yeah, it's infotainment. It's BuzzFeed type stuff. And that's fine as long as you know what you're getting. As long as you're like, okay, this is not actually my reality. This is what makes them the most money and gets the most clicks, is this alarming stuff. The reality is 99.5% of us are going to have, no interaction with Ebola or ISIS or any of this other shit. We might have an interaction with becoming overweight or becoming depressed, or like these really, or eventually cardiovascular disease that takes a lot of people. My dad had a heart attack a few years ago. Luckily he's feeling better, but that's the stuff that's going to get you. And our media spends almost no time telling us how to navigate through those things.
Yeah, that's true. And a lot of this stuff is, kind of orchestrated. I don't like the term conspiracy theory because I think it makes people sound kind of nutso, and there are a lot of crazy conspiracy theorists out there that just have these, theories backed by nothing. But I don't think that it's that crazy to say that the media is an orchestrated machine. I don't think that's out of line.
Well, I mean,
mainstream media.
Yeah, conspiracy theory is one of those phrases where the second you acknowledge there are conspiracies, you're now, putting yourself in a certain box. And the second you say that there's no conspiracies ever, then you're just an idiot who's going to be taken advantage of, because there have been conspiracies throughout history, not just over the past 100 years. That's like, par for the course in human history. And I think people just look after their own interests. And when you get to a higher level, you don't stop doing that in a lot of cases, unless you've had some kind of personal or spiritual breakthrough. And even then, like, plenty of spiritual people end up being fucked up. I think that everybody is protecting their own interests. And if you happen to be an oil company, do you want a world that looks like a place where everybody needs oil, or do you want a world where, everybody's driving their electric cars and paying nothing, and everything's, just rainbows and water sprinklers and ice cream trucks powered by solar? Maybe you don't want that world. So that's what we're dealing with, is these really powerful groups have emerged that make so much money from the world exactly as it is right now that they're not so sure about allowing us to change certain behaviors, but we're going to do it anyway, and we already are.
But I think some of these groups are kind of, excuse my language, complete idiots, because, the oil lobby has just spent, I can't remember the statistic, but it was an insane amount of money to fight solar energy initiatives, right? Instead of taking that money, they could have taken it and invested in solar companies and actually made probably more money than they have spent basically delaying the inevitable, which is new green energy. So it's like, in my opinion, oil is a finite resource as far as we're concerned, to our knowledge. So these guys are kind of complete idiots. Why don't they just invest in clean energy, put their hands in several buckets, then they can still make money. It just doesn't make logical sense.
Yeah, it's short-sighted thinking. I think the best people consider themselves to be human beings first, and, executives of a company or citizens of a country second. And that's increasingly going to be what we value as a society, because we're all connected by this amazing thing, the internet. So I don't care so much if you're a Canadian or an American. If you're a good podcaster, I'm probably listening. And that's something that hasn't existed before for most of history. So it's pretty neat.
That's cool. Well, let's talk about the new alt currency stuff that you wanted to discuss.
Sure. So I've become kind of a lightning rod, because cryptocurrency is a very controversial area still. They're basically reinventing money from the ground up. And money is one of those topics that has a lot of, a lot of nerves and a lot of emotion around money. And so it's a controversial area, and a lot of people don't like the fact that I'm pretty open about which coins I like and don't like, but there's such variation in cryptocurrency.
So why would people, what do you mean? Are you getting negative internet feedback? Are you getting trolls? Are you getting people saying, you shouldn't be saying which coins you're I don't understand.
Oh, well, it all goes back to people protecting their interests. There are some coins that are basically just rip-offs, and you can, I shouldn't say rip-off, because if somebody's willing to pay and it is what it is,
there's some intrinsic value there,
right? Then that's great. But they're coins, let's just say they're older coins, and a lot of the marketing is kind of old school, dishonest stuff. Sock puppet accounts and inflating the comments on websites, just kind of the same kind of thinking that the oil company executive has. And again, nothing wrong with that because I understand that people need to survive. But there are newer currencies that have come out over the past few months, and I've helped out one of them with their marketing and stuff because they're doing all this amazing stuff, and they're not even bothering to tell the world about it. And so I've helped out Hyper a bit with their PR, and that's attracted a lot of negative attention from some of these older coins. And so they say, oh, you're just, whatever, like you're trying to make money off of Hyper. Of course I'm trying to make money off of Hyper. That's what this thing is all about. We're reinventing money. But
you believe in Hyper, and why is that? Why out of all these coins, that Hyper is the one that you're interested in?
I believe in God, and I believe in marijuana edibles. I don't believe in Hyper.
Okay.
Like based on all the information I've seen, Hyper is a good product, and that's really all I can say. It's a good place for my money based on my risk tolerance, and it's a good place for me to spend time telling other people about it just because it's done in a good way. And the second that's no longer the case, then I won't be on board with that one, right? As I only care about what's the best thing out there. And that's how most of us are with most things. So it's kind of cool that now we can do that with our money. Like for most of our lives, we didn't look at the US dollar and go, is this really in line with my lifestyle? Like the same way you think like, I kind of like the Prius, but I don't know if I really need all this shit. I might just go with whatever, like a Corolla.
I don't think people did that with the US dollar, but I do think, for a long time cash was king, and then credit cards came out. And then I think when debit cards came out, there was a lot of, I'm 30. I remember when debit cards came out. It was within my lifetime. It was when I was in high school when they started issuing them. And there was actually issues with debit cards because some people, I know the concept is super basic, didn't get it. And I knew a friend's mom who thought it was like a credit card and would overspend. She didn't understand it was taking money directly from her checking account. So I think there's been shifts, but this is the biggest shift, I think, in currency that has ever existed almost.
Yeah, it absolutely is. It's one of the biggest shifts in just the way humans interact. If you think about it, that I can hire a graphic designer in China because they happen to have the best graphic designs. We agree to a price. He sends me the graphics, and within 5 seconds, he's been fully paid. And within 10 minutes of that, he has access to those funds and can spend it however he wants at any merchant around the world that takes Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies. That's cool. That hasn't really existed before. The fact that we could do that with no middleman telling us what the terms are and taking his hefty cut of that. You can just do it. People can just interact peer-to-peer. And that revolutionized music, and it revolutionized video, and now it's starting to revolutionize money.
So what if someone who doesn't understand cryptocurrency says, well, why don't I just use PayPal or Western Union? What's the difference between sending my money through PayPal and sending it through a Bitcoin or Hypercoin or whatever? I know the answer, but
I think the illusion of safety is what you're getting with one of those older ways of sending money. That's all you're getting. You're not getting the speed, and you're certainly not getting the best deal, and you're not getting the fun of the possibility of a huge upside. You get your $1,000 from Mexico or whatever. It's going to be $1,000. It's not going to be $2,000 next week. But with cryptocurrency, there is that possibility because it's just another. It's another network technology like the cell phone, like Facebook, like Twitter. It's one of those things where the more users on the network, the more value a single user can tap into. If there are only 1,000 people in the country using cell phones, not so important that you have AT&T or Verizon Wireless. But if there are 100 million people who have cell phones, now pretty much everybody wants to use a cell phone carrier. And the same thing is starting to happen with money where these networks are forming. Bitcoin is the most well-known one. That's the original. Since then, there have been other networks, Litecoin, Dogecoin, or Dogecoin, as some people call it, Hyper. There have just been a whole bunch of them. There are more than 500 right now that operate, and they operate on their own software code and principles, and their different use cases. And it's not being declared by some government or corporation. It's just people putting these things out there, almost like financial viruses, and allowing communities to start to use them as a tool for trade.
But why Hyper? Why do you feel like at this moment it's a good place to park your money?
I do a lot of research before I put any of my money into anything other than Bitcoin. And I was even wrong about Bitcoin. I've been pretty...
What do you mean by that wrong?
I thought it would be much further along by now than it is. both price-wise and in terms of getting through some of the hurdles that the banks and governments have thrown in its path. Because they're doing it in such an obvious way, like the bit license attempts and treating everything as a money transmitter business and using these really antiquated laws that were designed to keep drug traffickers in the 70s from bringing money into the U.S. They're applying these laws to like startups and dorm rooms and in Silicon Valley. Clearly doesn't make any sense, and it's slowing down the acceptance of this technology. But we're gonna get past that at some point, and when we do, I think a lot of my kind of head in the sky bullshit sounding predictions will actually come true. But I was wrong about the timing, and I was just wrong, period. I shouldn't have told anybody else that I thought this was a cool technology, because you don't have to. All you have to do is say, dude, just download download the blockchain app, send a friend any amount of money, and then tell me that's not revolutionary.
So you talked about having a negative backlash. Are you getting attacked on the internet because of your beliefs?
It's not even a negative backlash, because most people really like the fact that I spend time covering crypto, because there aren't that many journalists who do it in a series.
You're probably one of the premier journalists covering it. I mean, you've written a couple books, right?
Yeah, I've put out some short format eBooks, because that's the only thing you can do. If you try to write a paper book, by the time your shit comes out 18 months later, it's all going to be
outdated,
obsolete stuff.
Yeah.
You're going to be talking about companies that don't even exist anymore and technologies that are just outdated. The negative backlash, again, it's from coin developers and coin investors who are not in hyper, basically. So I could call them competitors if I wanted to, whatever they are. There are still a lot of people who seem to appreciate me covering this stuff, or I want to continue doing it. I'm not a glutton for punishment. And so far, the tips in Bitcoin outweigh the shitty comments from people and the kind of fun Photoshop attempts. I wonder how many dicks have been inserted in my mouth. But
you gotta tell me what do you have memes out there with photoshopped penises on your face? What's going on here?
I have everything. Anything you can imagine that's mean or is designed to make me unhappy is out there. But other people enjoy it, so that makes me happy. That makes me accepting of it.
David, I'm really, really happy that you brought that up, because I have, in an unreleased episode, soon TBD, one of the top female video game programmers, and she talks about the harassment online directed towards women. And a lot of men who are public figures that I've talked to haven't experienced as much harassment. So I'm glad you're getting some of what us ladies feel sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that'll...
I've never had a Photoshop dick in my face. I'm excited for you.
It's a part of working on the internet, is you attract all kinds of people at all kinds of different levels of their personal development. And I'm at my own level, and I have my own setbacks. And sometimes you get a dick drawn in your mouth, and that's cool. And it happens to everybody. Like, it happens to fucking, like, Kevin Smith. So if it happens to a guy like that, then... it's just a weird badge of honor in this bizarre society of ours.
So do you consider yourself just covering cryptos at this point, or you said you wanted to kind of stay away from politics?
Whatever's the most interesting thing in the world, at least to me, is what I want to cover. So for now, I've just been completely fascinated with crypto, because when it does take off, it'll be one of those things that's as big as...
Well, what do you mean does? I think it's taken off quite a bit. I mean, we have some of the biggest business and venture capital people in Silicon Valley pouring investment money into it. We have, mainstream outlets like, Overstock.com accepting Bitcoin. It seems like it's taken off.
Even the fact that you're having me on to talk about this means that it hasn't taken off to the extent that I want it to. Because you wouldn't have me on and be like, David's coming on today to talk about the Samsung S5. What is that like having one of those? Because you probably just have one, or you have a friend who has one. It's not something that's even worth talking about. But it's still a novelty. It's still one of those things where not that many people are using it. I think only a couple million people at the most are in crypto right now.
Only the cool people like us.
Yeah, only the cool people.
So what would your definition of crypto taking off be? Just mainstream, everywhere, going to Starbucks, crypto, people just getting off cash? Like what? Tell me some of these head-in-the-sky predictions. I want to hear them.
Well, PricewaterhouseCoopers put out a report back in July that by 2025, there might be no need for traditional banks in our economy, period.
That is huge.
And I think the only mistake they made is in saying 2025. I think due to the smartphone and social media and just how fucking good cryptography already is. I mean, Hyper is an insanely good currency. Whatever is created a year from now will be even better by whoever does that. Bitcoin itself is 5 years old and is still phenomenal from a technical standpoint compared to anything the banks have. So I don't see any reason why we can't get a total rout in the next few, 5-6 years. Who knows how long it'll take, but I think it's going to be faster than 2025. And I think we're going to look around one day and it's going to be like telephones. Like, you don't find phone booths anymore, except for maybe the dirtiest gas station might have one with the, the receivers like dangling off this half-eaten phone line. So
it
those
smells like urine.
Yeah, it smells like urine. Those are still around, but that's not the mainstream anymore. Everybody went the mobile phone route, and I think everybody's going to go the crypto route, because if you ask anybody, would you like to have 100% of your nearly 100% of your money when somebody sends you money, or would you like to have 97%? Most people go, I'll go with the 100%. And if you ask most people, well, when you get that money, would you like it to have the fact that it's limited forever, that there's only going to be so many made, or would you like some person in an office somewhere to have the unilateral ability to print more of what you just earned at any time for almost any reason behind closed doors? Again, most people will say, I don't want that. I want what you just described before. I want the cool smartphone thing. Fuck the other thing. But there are people who go, no, this sounds scary. This is dangerous and libertarian and high tech. I want the person behind the closed doors, because that's always worked so well. And that's an argument that people make. Paul Krugman writes for the New York Times, and he is very anti-Bitcoin. And I would just ask somebody like that, not that he would even feel the need to reply, but how is this world working out for us? I live in a pretty middle-class area, and there are homeless people who sleep in the underpass right next to where I live. Why is money not getting to them? They could do something. And it's not just homeless people. It's also, why are we spending so much money on crazy things? We have 700 plus military bases around the world. How is this stuff being financed? We have, this insanely complex spy grid that Edward Snowden kind of shined a light on. And that's enormously expensive. This shit would not exist if it were all up to each of us. Do we want to add to the NSA Kickstarter? Probably not. So no more new data centers for you. If that's how we just ran our society, more or less, we would get more of the things we want: more well-paved roads, more schools, more healthy food, and maybe a little bit less of the NSA, let's build drones and bombs and create a whole military-industrial complex where we keep the Middle East at war to boost our profits. Maybe we'd have a little bit less of that.
Yeah, and I think there's a huge discrepancy between what the American people feel and want as a whole and what is being represented in our government. I mean, most people, you talked about in the beginning how, red, blue, whatever, it's just, we're just people. And I think something that has been a common thread among people that I speak to, regardless of their political affiliation, is that they don't feel that the government represents them. So whether you're left, right, center, middle, wherever the heck you are, far left, far right, most people can agree that they're unhappy with the system. So I think you make a really good point there, saying, is this working for you? So what are some of the arguments he makes against Bitcoin?
Oh, I don't know. He's an old fool. We don't have to give him any press outside of the New York Times. But there's this. Some people just like the idea of government, and there's nothing wrong with that. And we're going to continue to have government. There's nothing that will change in that respect. But I just think that government's going to get better over time, and companies are going to get better over time, and it's going to be due to them using better money. It's the same as if you could be the best surgeon in the world, if you're operating in 1940 with their old ghetto surgical knives and everything's all shitty and old and weird, like Masters of Sex type stuff, then you're not gonna be able to do that much stuff. But if you're the same surgeon, just as smart, in the year 2014, and they have the robotic, the robotic arms that can go in, and the little microbots and all this crazy stuff, then you can really get some stuff done. And
because they're doing surgical procedures with extreme technical precision.
With total precision, yeah. This brings us science and money, and we have science in everything else now, so why would we leave that out of the most important thing?
That is a very good point.
But again, I could be completely wrong. and Bitcoin could be this huge Ponzi scheme. Certainly, I was pretty pissed about just the slide in value, continuously losing money when like Bill Gates goes on TV and says Bitcoin is better than currency. He said that on Bloomberg TV, and a few weeks before that, PayPal announced they would integrate it. Just earlier today, PayPal put up a new blog post on their corporate blog about how Bitcoin is where they're at right now, how they went from beaming money on PDAs 15 years ago to now Bitcoin today. You see all this stuff, and you would think, all right, I'm good. I should be retired by now. But the price of Bitcoin just keeps going down and down, and there have been some little recoveries. But the question is why. It starts to bum you out a little bit, Do you have any theories? I mean, we talked about on your podcast on the David Seaman Hour episode that I was on about, the gentleman or whoever mysterious person selling $7 or $8 million out of Bitcoin. And do you think that has caused scare among the community and fear or uncertainty at least? I mean, I don't want to put too many theories out there, but I think the stock market has crashed this week, or had a little mini crash, and people are kind of freaking out like, oh, it's Ebola and it's this and it's that. And I don't necessarily think that people are giving up on Bitcoin. It might just be kind of the overall financial hysteria that's happened this past week. I don't know if you follow the markets at all. Yeah, it's actually done surprisingly well against the New York Stock Exchange and the NASDAQ. So, money's been bleeding out of the markets, but crypto has done fairly well over the last week, which people are starting to notice, because it's cool if it doesn't correlate to the market, because then people will start to have money in crypto just as a hedge.
Safety, right?
Yeah, as a safety against the market going down.
So what is it at right now?
Earlier today when I checked, I think it was in the 370s or so.
So it slipped quite a bit from the all-time high. It
slipped quite a bit from the all-time high, and it slipped quite a bit from just a few days ago when it was back above 400, and it seemed like all lights were green. All things are ready for liftoff. It's a tricky animal. I think that Satoshi, whoever he was, the intention there, early Bitcoiners think the intention of Bitcoin was just to make them obscenely rich, and Maseratis and Xboxes and women in the hot tub. They want that whole lifestyle. And some of them have it already, and some of them will have it if Bitcoin goes back to where it should go.
Is that what you want, David?
I already have all those things, Rosie. So minus the Maseratis, I have all those things. But I think that I got kind of distracted by thinking about Maseratis and hot tubs.
You were saying that the Satoshi and the original creators were thinking about Maseratis and hot tubs, and some of them have it and some of them will.
Right.
Well, and then you got distracted.
Satoshi put out a very precise instrument, and that instrument is like this self-proselytizing, organic, clearly superior form of money that, a number of governments have tried to crush it. A number of shady people have gotten involved with it, and that has tarnished its reputation temporarily. And yet it survives and it thrives. Why is that? I think it's designed to do that. I think the fact that it creates new coins every day is almost like viral shedding, like when you're sick with the disease and the virus literally like comes out of your skin and other people can catch it. That's what Bitcoin is in a positive way. It's changing and transforming the financial system from the inside out. And with that service circle, you can actually transition your money from Bitcoin to fiat immediately, and they'll send the money to your credit card, and that credit is on your credit card by the next day. It's like pulling the thread on somebody's sweater that you don't like, and they're not paying attention, and at first they don't mind because they still have their sweater, but you keep pulling on that thread, and it is connected to the rest of the sweater, and before you know it, half their sweater's gone. And that's what Bitcoin, I think, is designed to do, is before you know it, it is this $1 trillion financial network that everybody just accepts because it's better and because you can agree to it. I mean, what other technology would Chinese entrepreneurs and Chinese hackers and shady people in Eastern Europe and Silicon Valley billionaires in the United States, what other technology would they all agree on as a fair form of money?
And David Seaman.
That's pretty, and me, yeah. That's pretty extraordinary that was accomplished. I don't quite know how, but it was. We accepted Bitcoin, at least a couple million of us. And from here, it could be really promising, but the Bitcoiners who think it was just designed to create rarity and make every individual unit worth $1 million, I don't think that was his intention. I think what we're seeing now with alt currencies, that's supposed to happen. He created like a kind of like a Wright flyer, that, you know, the Wright brothers flyer, but instead of only taking off for a few seconds and proving that flight is technically possible, he created a Wright brothers flyer that is just going to lap around the world forever and remind us not only is this possible, it's happening. But that's not the end point. And if you're only looking for preserving value, there are probably better algorithms for that. And if you're looking for sending small amounts of value, maybe there are better algorithms for that. But for money itself, Bitcoin has achieved something no other technology ever has done.
I wouldn't necessarily. I know you talked about the volatility and it kind of sliding down the past, 6 months, a year?
Mm-hmm.
But I think that the more people that find out about it and understand it, I mean, because there's a finite number of coins as well, and this is that across the board for all cryptos? Or just Bitcoin?
It's not across the board for all cryptos. They all have their own rules. It's based on what's coded into the coin.
Okay. But I just think that most people still just don't know about it. And that is what's causing kind of uncertainty and a lot of volatility. And I mean, if you look at general currency exchange in general, Forex trading, currency trading is quite volatile in general. So because a lot of, you know, like you said, as you were calling cash fiat money, I mean, some countries still do back their money by gold, but most don't. You know, it's backed by the full faith of the, you know, American government or whatever.
Yeah.
Which, you know, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of people don't have faith in. So currency exchange in general, whether it's hard currency or cryptocurrency, has always been a volatile thing. So I wouldn't be that concerned about it. You know, my sister, who is, you know, in her early 20s and quite, you know, knowledgeable about technology, doesn't know what Bitcoin is. I've explained it to her multiple times and she just doesn't get it. She's like, I just don't get it.
It's money that doesn't fuck you. That's all you need to know. It's money not run by creepy people. If they are creepy, then at least the rules are right there and the rules can't be changed, which makes it better than your account at Chase or Bank of America.
What I'm saying is that, you know, you're saying, you know, Bill Gates is coming out, all these people are coming out for it, yet there's still been a slide recently. And I think that is just something that happens when something is still new.
Sure, that's a possibility. I've also just kind of I've delinked in my thinking Bitcoin from being an investment, and now it's back to what it was when I first started reading about it, which is a really cool technology that can disrupt a whole bunch of stuff and put a bunch of creepy old fucks out of business forever and give a lot of younger, smart people a say in things for the first time, a say in how our money moves around the world, a say in how we pay for things when we check out on a e-commerce kind of thing. We're going to be able to decide how do we want the rules to be from here on out, because the previous rules suck and they're not internet native. So they might still apply in everything else, but when you're on the internet, this is going to be money from now on in some form, whether it be Bitcoin or another one. And I find it's more fun to follow if you're not strictly thinking about when will it get to $5,000 or when will I get my Maserati money. Although actually I want a Tesla. I don't even want a Maserati. I'm just kind of thinking about other people's wishes. But
Maseratis are too loud. You were test driving a Tesla this week.
Yeah, I played around with one in Santa Monica. Didn't get to test drive it. I was just behind the wheel. I'm not really at a point where I can afford a Tesla right now at all. There are things I want to get before I get the Tesla.
But you know that, well, I don't know if your Bitcoin money is going to skyrocket or hyper or whatever, but you know that they're setting to release a second generation, which is a little bit more affordable.
Yeah, when that comes out, I'll definitely grab one of those. I'm a big believer in what Elon Musk is doing. The guy's clearly a genius.
Even though he's associated with PayPal?
Even though he's associated with PayPal. Look, 15 years ago, PayPal was revolutionary, and I think one of their first media mentions in the New York Times, it was kind of panned. It was like, well, whoever wants to link money to an email address? That sounds weird. And that's kind of what it is with Bitcoin now, and with the other ones. Like, well, who would just want money that's not backed by a government? Well, I think as that sweater unravels more and we see more of this WikiLeaks type shit where these governments are just cruel, just vicious and cruel and weird and spending our money on lots of bullshit, more and more young people are going to be like, dude, I'm out. Like, I'm just out with this bullshit. No more bailouts. No more $500, $600 billion annual defense budgets. What are we defending against? You know, like there are people who are unemployed and $600 million on that healthcare.gov website. I would have signed up for that shit if there was a little tab that had like get your Ebola vaccine. Get to the front of the line for that one. But
I would not let anyone inject benign Ebola into me or whatever, or is in vaccines. I don't trust vaccines at all.
Well, you're not alone in that. But I don't know enough about any of that shit, so I just get the vaccine because at least that way I'm covered. I've done what society says I need to do. So versus not getting the vaccine and then you get Ebola. I know there isn't even a vaccine yet. Versus being the one person who's going to like listen to InfoWars and not get the vaccine. And then you're the only person out of all your friends who's dead. And they're like, well, Dave didn't get the vaccine. I don't want to be that guy. You know what I mean? Like,
so you would get it. You would let them inject you with weak strains of Ebola?
Well, we already have. When you're a kid, you get all kinds of injections. And they wiped out polio completely. And that was something that was like really ravaging society in America.
What about the mercury and stuff like that? I don't know.
I mean, Western medicine, I don't think they have the whole picture figured out.
I have issues with vaccines because a lot of vaccines have been linked to childhood autism and other things like that. So I'm not 100% sold on vaccines, and I never, ever, ever get my flu shot because every time I get my flu shot, I always get the flu 3 times.
Well, then I would definitely not get the flu shot from that place. It sounds like the worst deal ever.
Well, because when they give you the flu shot, they're giving you strains of the flu that they think will hit that winter. But no one knows for sure, right?
Yeah, they're like a record producer. They're just, they'll sign Kesha, they'll sign a few others to see what sticks.
So I always get the flu vaccine. Well, not always anymore, I've learned. But I used to get the flu vaccine, and they would give me, whatever. I think there's like 22 strands of different flus in there. And I would get the, mini flu. And then it's supposed to, you get immune or your reserves build up, your white blood cells build up for the real flu. And then I would get the real flu too. So I don't know if that example is a good example, but I don't trust that. But if you want to get the Ebola vaccine, I will go with you to see if you die.
Yeah. Well, what I was starting to say before the Ebola thing is there are a lot of us who can just see through the banks and see through these politicians. And we're like, we just want to live our lives. We don't want to go to some bank branch. And when we sign up for our checking account, the first thing we read through is that creepy USA Patriot Act notice.
I haven't seen that. Tell me. Because I've had a bank account consistently with a bank since I was 18. So for 12 years. So I haven't seen this. So that was before the Patriot Act. So tell me.
Well, when you sign up for an account, at the bottom of the page, there will be something that says we share your information with the government in compliance with the USA Patriot Act. And then it goes into the fine print of that. And you're like, okay, I'm giving you my money. Or wait, I'm not even giving you my money yet. You're selling me on your services on your checking account. And the best manners you can bring to the table is, by the way, we're going to share all your shit. Just got to make sure you're not a terrorist. So maybe I won't use you anymore. It has nothing to do with me being shady. It has to do with you being shady. Like, why are you doing that in the first place? And
I did not know that.
Our whole financial system has just been turned into Swiss cheese post 9/11. It's another surveillance thing. It's another shoe waiting to drop surveillance wise. I don't want to talk about it because I personally don't care. Like, the reality is all your shit is looked at some point. That's the new reality of whatever, living in today is about. But it's a shitty system. It's not even that stuff. There's no taste. It's a tasteless system. You walk into a bank branch. It's sweaty because they don't air condition that part of the ATM area. It's sweaty. The ATM machines are kind of loud. There's some old lady just punching away in front of you like it's the first time she's used an ATM machine. And 10 minutes later you get there and you're literally sweating as you're trying to shove your check into the little reader. It spits it back out. You're like, oh fuck, what do I do now? I thought I signed the back. You sign the back again. You shove it back in there. And then it's like, all right, you got.
I'm kind of getting turned on by this sweating, shoving. What's going on?
There's a lot of shafts going in and out of things. But anyway, and then after all that shit, it's like $200 is available immediately. The rest will be available whenever the fuck we feel like it. And I've had that happen before. You're like, oh great, I'm glad you finally gave me my own money after 7 days. And there's so much variation in all of it that I feel like young people who are connected to the internet,
they just want it instantly, right?
Older people who are smart and have money. They want it instantly, and they want to know what the fuck is going on. Like, what are you doing with my money? Like, even today, I looked on my bank app, and I was like, some charges have just not even posted yet. And it's like, I already got the food. Like, where is the transaction? You know what I mean? I already ate it. So there should be some kind of record. Bitcoin, you're always getting the notification instantly. Any other cryptocurrency, it's the same deal. I don't know which one ends up making us all multimillionaires, but it's going to be something that's either out there or will be out there soon.
Hopefully it's the 4 I'm invested in.
Fingers crossed. And I think it's going to be brutal for them. It's going to be like what happened to Blockbuster, what happened to Kodak. When you're in an industry that the internet has decided is fucked, you're fucked sooner or later. You know, like they did that with music, did it with cameras.
But this is what I'm talking about getting with the program. Kind of like what I mentioned with the oil industry. Here's an old establishment, and instead of getting with the times and actually making money off of it, they're fighting it. And this is the exact same thing with banks, because and every other institution, it just doesn't make logical sense. You mentioned Blockbuster. Blockbuster was given a chance to buy Netflix. Netflix made an offering to Blockbuster in the early days of Netflix and said, here's our business model, buy us. And Blockbuster said, nobody is going to want to do this. No. And they turned down the offer. And, this is fact. You guys can Google it and look it up online. In the early days of Netflix, they were offered to Blockbuster. Blockbuster said no. So because people get so comfortable in quote unquote the system, like you said, money system in this example, banks, corporatized banks, the machine, and they get so comfortable, they don't see the thread, like you said, being pulled every single day. And instead of getting with it, who is it? Was it the president of JP Morgan Chase who was bad mouthing Bitcoin? He wanted to buy like a huge stake in it, and then they turned him down, and then he was bad mouthing. Was it JP Morgan Chase?
I'm not sure. I think that Diamond sees some of the based on his recent comments. I think he sees the potential in some of these technologies, but probably doesn't like Bitcoin because it would do away with a lot of traditional banking. There's no getting around. I
can't remember who it was, but it was the CEO. It wasn't Jamie Dimon, but it was the CEO of a traditional bank, and he was just bad mouthing Bitcoin.
Well, this is their bread and butter. I mean,
exactly. Yeah. But why bad mouth it? If you see something that's moving forward, why not grab it, invest in it? So to answer your question, you said, I want to know what the banks are doing with our money. I'll tell you exactly what they're doing with our money. They take our money. So for those of you who don't know how banking works, when you put your money into the bank, they benefit from it. They take the money that you put in the bank, in your savings account, in your checking account, and they use that money to invest in very, very risky assets.
To buy demons. For clowns who build drones and start wars.
They actually invest in, as we know with the financial meltdown in 2006, mortgage-backed securities, which were at the time were inflated by a fake real estate market. They buy these risky securities, and then they make their money back. So every dollar that you put into the bank makes back 20 times that.
Banking is a great deal for them, not so much for you.
It's a type of Ponzi scheme, and then you bounce a check, or you don't have enough money or whatever, and they charge you fees. Well, the fees are just BS, because your money that you're leaving in there is actually making them 20 times that amount of money. Yet they're charging you, $40 for a bounce check. It doesn't make any sense. So like you said, David, it's a system, and it doesn't make sense, and it's not at the benefit of the user.
I love the maintenance fee. I get hit with like a $15 monthly maintenance fee if I don't use my debit card at least 5 times.
What bank are you in? Well, I don't know.
It's a Chase account. So I get a maintenance fee if it's not used at least 5 times. And why are you charging me a maintenance fee when I'm giving you my money, which you are making money off of?
They're making huge amounts of money, and that there's 2 separate parts of the bank. There's the investment banking side and the retail banking side. The investment banking side is the side that should be heavily regulated by the U.S. government, and it's not. There's a free-for-all. And the retail banking side, they put all these restrictions on the retail banking side so that it looks like they're doing their job and monitoring stuff. But the investment banking side is business as usual, closed door handshakes behind closed doors with politicians.
I don't think we should be necessarily heavily regulating investment banks more. They just shouldn't be playing with anyone's money who can't afford to lose all of it.
They're doing some pretty risky stuff. They should at least be watched as much as the NSA is watching your Gmail account. And they're not.
Yeah. Well, they're not going to find much in my Gmail. It's pretty boring emails. But isn't that weird to think about, that everybody's emails are just being stored somewhere so that if they need to, they can go through it one day?
That's creepy. It also creeps me out that there's a naked machine at LAX.
Yeah, and somebody hacked Snapchat recently, so nothing is safe anymore except for crypto. All it does is lose you money, but you still have the same balance. You have exactly the same balance. You still have your 10 Bitcoins or whatever it is. No, but seriously, it's just going to change. These things don't even make sense to us. The fact that we can look at something and go, oh, this is outdated, that means it's outdated no matter what. If you look at a phone, you're like, that looks like last year's phone, good chance it's last year's phone. And this technology is not just last year's phone, it's like 50 years ago phone. Like if you watch an episode of
it's like over 50 years ago. It's like Dragnet.
An episode of Mad Men where he writes a check and buys something with that. That's pretty much the system we have today. They've done a good job of making it seem all electronic. Now there's even Apple Pay, but it's still the same centralized shit that was happening 50 years ago because we didn't have anything better.
You can order Hello Kitty checks like me. I mean, you can get your own design at least.
Yeah. But it's going to be so crazy because, look at how much YouTube did to entertainment. How you can be some comedian who takes off on YouTube, and before you know it, you have your own show on Comedy Central. That's happening with money in a weird way, where you can be some genius app developer who creates something on the iPhone that everybody likes to use to send their money, and it's based on Bitcoin or uses one of the other currencies, and that could take off in a huge way. I don't see any reason why it couldn't.
I think it will take off in a big way, and I don't think your predictions are head in the cloud. I think a lot of them are pretty on point. I have a technical question for you, since you seem to be doing a lot more research on crypto than I have. I've just delved into the very top surface of it. I don't understand how it works. Someone told me if you keep mining after all Bitcoins are mined, then you mining will validate payments. Does that make any sense? Or maybe I'm wording that wrong?
I don't know. I don't know what happens with that. You mean after all the Bitcoins are mined? Somebody
was saying if you keep mining after all Bitcoins are mined, your mining will validate payments, and then you'll get like a processing fee or something back. I don't know if that was just...
I think miners would still get the mining or the transaction fee. So I think there would still be some...
So can you explain that? I don't understand.
I don't know enough about what would happen when that occurs, but I'm pretty sure there would still be a financial incentive for people to run Bitcoin.
Yeah, so that's what I was told, that if you keep mining and running Bitcoin, then you will be getting the transaction fee. But I don't know what that means.
I'm sure Satoshi figured that part out. I'm sure he wasn't like, all right, so gonna create this $1 trillion currency, but then we're gonna have the training wheels just fall off and the thing's gonna collapse. I'm pretty sure that the transaction fee would go to the miners, but I don't want to speak with certainty because I don't really know.
Okay, I wasn't sure because that was something that was brought to my attention, and I asked Crypto Casey, and I don't think he knew either. So, what are the coins that you are excited about now other than Hyper?
I still own a bit of Bitcoin. Obviously, if that comes in, I'll be happy, really happy. Not just because I'll make money, but because it'll be a more efficient, less vicious world. That one would be cool. So I own Bitcoin still. And I didn't get in super early. I got in starting at around 170 a coin, which now that it's so low doesn't even sound like you're a member of any kind of special club, It's like half the current price. But started getting in around 170, and I've hung on to some of those because I do believe in the idea. I think it stands a good chance of eventually figuring stuff out. Aside from that, I own a pretty big stack of Hyper. I keep buying more whenever the price dips.
What is Hyper at right now?
It's at around 17,000 Satoshis. And for people who don't know, there are 100 million Satoshis in a Bitcoin. It's just a smaller unit of measure. Think of it as like a penny for a Bitcoin. Like 100 pennies in a dollar, 100 million Satoshis in a Bitcoin. So it's at that price. And I just own that one because the economics are different. I was talking earlier about how I don't really think that Bitcoin is necessarily designed to be the one that is super rare and makes everybody rich. I don't think that Hyper is designed to do that either, but I think it's designed to attract such a wide user base that it will necessarily create an increase in value. But I don't know for sure. Who knows? I mean, it's essentially a very ballsy craps table bet at this point. But the numbers look good so far. I'm certainly up, and people who, have looked into Hyper since I started talking about it are really excited about what they're working on. And it comes down to being faster than Bitcoin. The settlement times are 20 times faster, which a lot of Bitcoiners tell me that doesn't matter. Maybe it doesn't, but me personally, if you ask me, would you like your money to be here in 10 minutes or in 30 seconds? I'm just going to say 30 seconds. Like all other things being equal, who's going to be like, well, a Bitcoiner on our Bitcoin told me it doesn't really matter, so I'm going to go with 10 minutes. Is that the correct answer? It's like this is just marketing, and these are just technologies. So if we're marketing to consumers and not to the people on our Bitcoin who are completely in the bag for Bitcoin, they're just going to go with whatever's best. They're not going to care. That's my theory anyways.
No, I agree. If someone told me that, I would say 30 seconds for sure, or 10 seconds, whatever you said.
Yeah, and which network would you like to use? One where all the new coins are created by these miners who have multi-million-dollar facilities in China and Iceland with really high-tech cooling stacks and all this stuff? Do you want that kind of network, which sounds, in some ways even more dystopian than the current financial system run by a few banks? Now it's run by a couple of tech billionaires, shadowy tech billionaires. Do you want that system, or do you want the system where every single person who runs the wallet on their desktop or laptop is a part of the network and is actually validating a part of those transactions and receiving coins in exchange for doing that? It just seems to me like a no-brainer that eventually you would want a network that's on millions of laptops and desktops instead of a network that's on, in the hands of a handful of very powerful mining companies. But to go back to what you said earlier about why aren't more companies getting into this? Why aren't the banks getting into this already?
It seems like they would. It's like, it's another way for, hey, if I'm a bank, I want to make money, right? And it seems like another way to invest, right?
I think the ones that do get into it early are going to do really well and will probably be dominant in whatever the future landscape looks like. But there are already some companies smart enough to get in. PayPal is the most prominent example. The fact that they are integrating Bitcoin is huge because Bitcoin was in some ways a way to get around PayPal. So that just shows you how subversive this technology is, that PayPal looked this thing in the eye and had a choice. Like, we can either pretend it's not in the room and watch our profits get destroyed and eventually PayPal's a joke, or we can
the MySpace of the payment world.
Right, the MySpace of the payment world. Or we can leverage our trust and the fact that we already have 150 million members, users, and that brand recognition of being part of eBay until they split up just recently. That can all be leveraged to turn them into a really big Bitcoin kind of brand, and they're going Bitcoin. So
I think that's awesome. I think that's so smart and forward thinking of PayPal, because
that's the way you do it. I mean,
exactly. That's what I've been preaching. It's like, if you're, again, back to my original example, if you're an oil company, don't fight solar energy, buy solar energy companies. Then you can make money in the old world and the new world.
Yeah, you're just an energy company. Don't think of yourself as an oil company.
Exactly. Oh, they're so
and these
dumb.
banks, you're just money companies. So if you can find better ways to issue loans that are economically efficient,
why not, right?
Then there won't be a need for peer-to-peer lending. And if you can start to do things in a more fair way, you might not get completely routed by cryptocurrency, because people don't want to learn a new thing. That's very true. Most people don't want to learn about something completely new and different from what they've always known. So they could stand a chance if they would just start being more honest and fair. Unfortunately, I don't think they're going to go that route. I think many of them might actually do the opposite, which is
fight Bitcoin, fight
Bitcoin,
altcoin,
and then show the whole world just how evil they are, in a sense, how non-competitive they are. I shouldn't say evil, just non-competitive.
Evil's a good word.
But it's not so much evil. It's like, these are the tools they've always had, and now somebody's come along. The comparison I say is like, they're witch doctors, and now we have modern operating rooms. And they're looking at the operating room and they're like, what is this shit? Because what they have known forever is now just not valid. This whole thing of like, let's look at the Federal Reserve chairwoman, let's look at every single word she says and try to figure out what that's going to mean for monetary policy in the future. That's not going to exist in the future. Our kids are just going to look online and be like, oh, okay, cool, there's a block halving coming up. There are going to be less coins produced next year, and everybody will know this. Everybody will be on the same page. It's just a level of economic fairness that we haven't had before.
Are you a fan at all of Lending Club? Do you know Lending Club?
I like the idea of peer-to-peer lending. I don't know enough about Lending Club in particular, and I tried to use them once and found them to be not very efficient. I mean, they're connecting people individually. I mean, they're allowing individuals to fund your loan, which is better than just going through a bank. But a lot of the infrastructure in terms of how they evaluate you, your credit score, all that stuff is still very much old school. Very much, it feels like a bank. Mm-hmm. And I think better things will come along than Lending Club for sure.
I was just wondering, since it was a peer-to-peer lending. So for those of you who don't know Lending Club, is peer-to-peer, and you can fund someone else's loan. So if I need, to get a loan for my car, and by the way, Lending Club is not a sponsor of this podcast. But if you guys want to sponsor.
Well, they call themselves peer-to-peer. To really be peer-to-peer, they have to be using fair money. So I think the ones that figure out Bitcoin first will be the massive peer-to-peer lenders. Because
if there is a peer-to-peer lending company that uses alternative currency, you're saying.
Yeah.
Instead of
anything other than
cash.
Fiat, because it's like you're building a level of unfairness on top of tools that are already unfair.
Oh, so much information. So what are you up to in the next few weeks? How can people find out about you? How can people follow you? How can people find out the most current information?
I put out a pamphlet recently that people can get on voin.co. Very catchy name, I know, but it's voin.co. And it's just like a 9 or 10 page pamphlet. You can download it instantly. And it comes with email support for a week. That's why it costs as much as it does. Because a lot of people, after they read the pamphlet, which in a few pages, in 9 or 10 pages, distills everything I know about how I've been able to make money over the past few months from alt currency, and then gives my email address at the bottom, and you get a week or 7 days of email support. Because a lot of people do have questions afterward. They want to know how to actually set this stuff up and do it themselves. And I'm happy to answer those questions. That's, I think, one of the best ways to get into crypto is if you don't get mine, get somebody's book. Andreas Antonopoulos has a really good book coming out in a couple months, Mastering Bitcoin. I don't really have any other projects. I'm just going to continue to talk about crypto, even if I'm less confident in it now. That dip and losing money earlier this year has made me less confident in it. But I believe that if we get this right, it's going to be such a better place that it's worth doing. It's worth fighting these people. It's worth taking the risk. It's worth continuing to put some of my money into it because it's that important. It's like we don't have to cower in the corner and allow our world to be run by 80-year-olds and trolls. That's not the world that we have to live in. And very soon we're not going to be living in that world.
I love how anti-establishment you are. It's
not about anti-establishment, just anti-efficiency and cruelty. We
anti-BS.
We can have an establishment. It just has to be fair.
And also, people can check you out on David Seaman Hour, your podcast.
People don't even have to listen. They can just subscribe, and then that will move us higher in the rankings, according to you, right?
Yes.
That actually helped. I told people, if you like the show, you should actually subscribe instead of just drive-by listening.
And what happened?
It popped up on the What's Hot.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Exactly. I know all the marketing secrets, guys. So that being said, check out David on his podcast, The David Seaman Hour. He has tons of great guests talking about alternative currencies, Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, and other interesting stories, some political stuff, right?
Still some politics. I had Jen Briney on recently. She does a great podcast where she actually reads through all the congressional bills and tells the public what's happening in like a non-legalese kind of way. So that's really interesting. Thanks again so much, Rosie. This is fun.
Yes, and you guys heard David. If you guys like this podcast and you want to help me out to have more listeners and more fans, go on iTunes and click on the subscribe button. It really, really, really does help the podcast out quite a bit. And as always, we're on SoundCloud and Stitcher Radio. We love positive comments, everyone. I recently got a couple emails from fans saying, "Oh my God, Rosie, awesome podcast, awesome guest." Guys, the emails to me are awesome, but what's even more awesome is putting positive comments on iTunes and Stitcher Radio. Those comments go a lot further to help the podcast, so I would greatly appreciate those fellow fans who emailed me this week to go on to iTunes and Stitcher and leave those emails as positive comments. That helps us out so much. And as always, we are sponsored by hugmetees.com. Spread love, give a hug, hugmetees.com. This has been Out of the Box Podcast with Rosie Tran.